My name is Laura Burdick, and I am excited to share with you our work on using paraphrases to study properties of contextual embeddings. This work is done in collaboration with Drs. Jonathan K. Kummerfeld and Rada Mihalcha. So the big idea behind our work is that we use paraphrases to analyze contextualized embeddings. So that raises the question, why are paraphrases special? What do they give us that other sources of data potentially don't give us? Well, the first thing that's special about paraphrases is that they naturally encode phrase semantics. So consider the following two phrases that are paraphrases. The first phrase says, note of the information provided by, and the second phrase says, note of the information contained in. Because we already know that these two phrases are paraphrases, we can assume that the semantics of these two phrases are essentially equivalent or very, very close to equivalent. The other thing that we get with paraphrases is we also get word semantics. And we get this if we have word alignment information between the two phrases in our paraphrase. So here is some alignment information for these two phrases. So the lines connecting the words indicate that two words are aligned between the two phrases. And then the number next to the line indicates the cosine similarity between those two words. So the first four words, which are the same words in the same order, have very high cosine similarity. When you get to provided and contained, you can see that they're aligned in the phrases, but they have slightly lower cosine similarity, most likely because they're different words, even though they express the same idea. So this is something unique that you get with paraphrase data that you don't get with all other sorts of data. We are going to be using paraphrases from the Paraphrase Database 2.0, which is abbreviated to PPDB. And PPDB gives us this word alignment information, which gives us the word semantics. PPDB also has an automatically generated quality rating for the different paraphrases, which we'll call the PPDB score. And some of the paraphrases are annotated with human quality ratings. So in this presentation, I'm going to walk through 3 of our experiments. We have lots more experiments that we did with paraphrases, and you can refer to our paper if you're interested in seeing some of those. So the first experiment that I'll talk you through is our experiment with phrase level embeddings. And the big question that we want to answer here with this experiment is, can BERT, a contextualized embedding algorithm, we're going to primarily focus on BERT here, though we'll talk a little bit about some other algorithms, can BERT distinguish between two phrases that are paraphrases and two phrases that are unrelated? BERT should be able to do this because the paraphrases should have the same semantics, which should allow BERT to see that, like, these are two paraphrases. So the way we're going to go about answering this question is using phrase level embeddings. And what I mean by that is we're going to take our two phrases in the paraphrase, we're going to send them through BERT, and then we're going to get word embeddings for all the words in the phrases. We're going to average together the word embeddings to get a phrase embedding. So we'll have a phrase embedding for each phrase, and then we'll take the cosine similarity between two phrase embeddings. Once we have those cosine similarities, we can take the cosine similarities that we generated from BERT, and we can compare those against our human annotations. And we can compare them using Spearman's correlation to ask, how close are these two lists of ratings? A few technical details. We're going to use the uncased base model of BERT, and we have about 25.7 thousand phrase pairs with human annotation, so that's a subset of the PPDB we're going to use for this experiment. And then we're also going to compare BERT with a word-to-vec model trained on Wikipedia. So here are the results. You can see along the y-axis here, we have Spearman's row. This is our correlation score between the embedding cosine similarities and the human scores. And then along this x-axis, we've separated out the paraphrases into short paraphrases, 1 to 2 words, medium, 3 to 4, long, 5 to 6 words. And then I'm going to show you 3 scores for each length. I'm going to show you the BERT score, the word-to-vec score, and then the automatically generated PPDB quality score. So looking at the BERT score first, those are the bars in red, you can see that BERT does substantially better on the longer paraphrases than it does on the shorter paraphrases. So here, higher is better, higher correlation is what we're looking for, and BERT just goes steadily up, which makes sense because if you've got more words, you've got more information and contextualized information for BERT to work with. for word2vec, we see it's kind of a little more flat across the different lengths of paraphrases. It goes up a little bit when you get to the longer paraphrases. And then for the automatic PPDB score, it also is best with the long paraphrases, but does pretty well for all of the different lengths. So our takeaways from this is that 1, BERT does better with the longer paraphrases. It doesn't do super well with the 1 to 2 word paraphrases. And then with these longer paraphrases, BERT is comparable to the PPDB score. Now, this isn't an entirely fair comparison because the PPDB score has access to some translation information and some external sources of information that BERT doesn't have access to. But we can see in general that BERT is learning about the same as this quality score that comes with the PPDB. So it's learning to be able to distinguish good paraphrases from bad paraphrases or phrases that aren't paraphrases at all. Okay, the second experiment I'm going to talk about is word level embeddings. So instead of embeddings at the phrase level, let's think about embeddings at the word level. And we are going to break down word level embeddings into 4 different categories. So the first category, the rows of this chart, are words that are aligned versus unaligned, and then the columns are words that are the same versus words that are different. Let me give you some examples to clarify this. So here's an example of a paraphrase: adopted by the General Assembly at, adopted by the Assembly at. In these 2 phrases, the word adopted is the same word. It's adopted in both phrases, and it's aligned in the paraphrase. It's in the same position in the paraphrase in both of these phrases. So that's our first category of words: same, aligned. Our second category is words that are aligned, so in the same position in the paraphrase, but different words. So this example, with a special focus on, with special emphasis on, focus and emphasis are in the same position in the paraphrase, but they're different words. That's our second category. Our third category is words that are the same word, but they're not aligned in the paraphrase. So consider, okay, so everything's fine, and you guys okay over there? Okay is the same word in both phrases, but it's in a different spot in the paraphrase. Finally, we have words that are unaligned and different. So consider between the Canadian government and, between the government of Canada and. Government in the first phrase and Canada in the second phrase are in different positions. They're different words. Now, they're not totally unrelated because they're still in the same paraphrase pair, but they're not nearly as related as the other 3 categories. So the question we want to ask here is, does BERT recognize that aligned words are more similar than unaligned words? That's the behavior we would like to see when we run this through our embedding algorithm. A few technical details: we're only going to use the highest quality paraphrases in the PPDB, and we'll randomly sample 2,500 words from each of the 4 categories that I just showed you. And then for aligned words, we're only going to consider words that are in a 1-to-1 alignment. There's also 1-to-many or many-to-1 alignments. We're going to ignore those for right now. So here's what we get with our BERT model. Notice along the x-axis we have cosine similarity all the way from negative similarity to perfect 1 similarity. And then along the y-axis, we have the number of instances normalized. And then we have 4 different curves shown in different colors here. Those are the 4 different categories of words that I just told you about. So there's a big peak over here on the right in this light blue peak. This is the same aligned words, and they consistently have the highest similarity. The other categories kind of overlap. We would hope to see that different aligned words have a higher similarity than unaligned words, but we don't really see that consistently. We can also look at the BERT large model, and one difference we see here is that same unaligned words, that's this orange curve down here on the left, have a much lower similarity in BERT large than they do in BERT base. We also looked at a couple of other models. We looked at BART large and GPT-2, and we see that they have a much sharper peak for same aligned words than we see in either of the BERT models. So our takeaway from this is that contextual embeddings consistently handle aligned words and paraphrases, but there are substantial variations across models in how peaked the distributions of same aligned words are. Okay, the last experiment I want to tell you about is punctuation. So punctuation is pretty different from other tokens and other words. Punctuation groups words together or separates them. It contributes to the overall structure and meaning of the phrase. There's very interesting previous work showing that differences in punctuation show up when you have different authors or different communities or things like that. So the question we want to ask here is the distribution of embeddings for punctuation different than the distribution for other words? So I am showing you here our 5 most common punctuation, colon, comma, hyphen, period, question, and the distribution for them. So we've got cosine similarity along the bottom, the number of instances along the y-axis. You can see in general, punctuation has a broader distribution of cosine similarities than other tokens, which indicates that punctuation embeddings vary widely depending on the context of the punctuation. The ones that have the widest distribution are comma and period, and those are very highly contextualized punctuation marks. Question mark and dash, hyphen, are less contextualized, and they tend to be used in more prescribed circumstances. So, for example, the question mark is almost always the last token in the phrase. Our takeaway from this is that Bert's representation of punctuation is surprisingly context sensitive, and with substantial variation even when we control for meaning. Some final takeaways from this, we can see that in general, Bert does consistently represent paraphrases, and we've talked about some of the nuances of that. We can also use paraphrases to explore other representation methods. Our methodology can be expanded to other sorts of embeddings and representations. We have a lot more experiments in the paper, so if you're interested in this, please check out our paper and check out some of the details of our other experiments. And thank you for your time and attention. My contact information is here, and I'm happy to talk about questions or thoughts about this work. Thanks.